For those of you who are new to our quarterly webinars, my name is Erica Lockhart.
And I'm Lauren Ruttenberg.
And together we are Ahead of the Curve Homes with Compass. And today we're going to talk about this crazy real estate market that we're in. It's probably no surprise to any of you on this Zoom, and just really talk about, how to navigate multiple offers from both a buyer's and a seller's perspective. And then we'll leave some time at the end for questions. Go ahead, Lauren.
Right. And I was just going to say, if anybody has a question that comes up, if you want to type it into the chat, that's a great way for us to see it. So you just hover your cursor like below the photograph of whoever's talking on the screen, and you'll see a little box that says chat. You just click on that. I mean, I guess everybody knows how to use Zoom now, but just in case.
Okay, so the first thing we'll cover are the market stats. And then after we present the market stats, then we'll get into our conversation.
Okay, so I'm going to share the screen. Can you guys see this?
Yes.
Okay. So here we go. Let me just. So introductions we've already done. We're going to do a market update. We're on to that now. And then we'll talk about today's market like Erica just said, and then Q&A. So current market. Okay, here we go.
Okay. So we will start with the key neighborhoods that we serve, which include Baldwin Hills, Baldwin Vista, Ladera, View Park, and Windsor Hills. And normally you'll notice that this is a slight change from the way we present market stats. So normally we show total closed sale volume, pending sales, average days on market, things of that nature. However, today we're going to focus on what the median sales price was 5 years ago in 2016 and compare that to the first half of 2021. And then we're also going to compare the first half of 2020 to 2021. So we think this will really kind of paint the picture of how values, quite honestly, have really changed pretty drastically over the last 5 years and then just year over year. So here you see that the median sales price in 2016 was $776,500. And fast forward to today where it's now $1,365,500. So it's increased 43% in approximately 5 years, and the year-over-year growth was 15%. So, it's no secret that we're in a dynamic real estate market, which is really being driven by historically low interest rates, by demand for more space as a result of the pandemic, and many of us being kind of sequestered to our homes for so long. I think another factor are, many millennials are entering their 30s, and typically that's when you purchase your first home. So if you take everything I just kind of mentioned and couple that with the inventory shortage and the picture, that I painted regarding a 15% median sales price increase year over year, it really it makes sense. Okay, so moving on to the condo market.
Okay. There we go.
Okay. So as we look at the condo market, we see the same trend. A 34% increase in median sales price from 2016 to 2021, and year over year, we saw a 12% increase.
And this is for the areas on top of the screen, just so you know. Okay, so then here we get into Mar Vista, and so actually Baldwin Hills, the whole Baldwin Hills area, Baldwin Hills, Ladera Heights, View Park, that area has seen the greatest rise percentage-wise of any of the areas that we're going to cover today, which is also interesting. But Mar Vista is the second highest. Okay, so Mar Vista in 2016, the median price was 1,350. And then today, the median price is 1,911,000. So that is an increase of 29% in 5 years. And then first half of 2020 versus first half of 2021, it's up 11%. And then the condo market in Mar Vista has also risen, but not as dramatically. So in 2016, the median price was $634,750. And in 2021, you'll see it's $755. It was actually slightly higher in the first half of 2020 than it is in the first half of 2021. So you can see here, In 5 years, the condo market in Mar Vista has gone up 20%, but year over year, it's down by 4% for the first half of the year. But the thing is, in 2020, there were 22 condos that sold from January 1st to June 1st, 2020. In that same period in 2021, there were 63 condos that sold. So it's almost three times the amount of inventory. So it's reasonable to expect that that the median price would go down a little with so many more units being sold.
Okay, so moving on to Culver City. So here, the median sales price increased by over 400,000 in a 5-year span, and 10% year over year, 2020 to 2021. So here, the data again is just showing that the increase in demand has not been met by a surge in listings. So that's why we're getting the bidding wars and the subsequent higher prices. And then for the condo market, so the median sales price gain was similar to that of the single family market at 23% from 2016 to 2021. And year over year, the median sales price remains relatively flat with a 1% decrease. And the same thing that Lauren mentioned, it's all because of the sales volume. So the first half of 2020, there were 67 closed sales. And in the first half of 2021, there were 115 closed sales. So just more volume. So it makes sense that you'll see that decrease in terms of the median sales price.
Okay, and now we hit Santa Monica. So in 2016, the median price for all homes, this is for all homes sold in all these areas for that year. So the median price was 2,450. In 2021, the median price is 3,277,500. So it's been a 25% increase over 5 years. And year to date, 2020 to 2021, it's gone up 19%. So it's kind of interesting, the first half of last year was the truly intense COVID months where really nothing happened. So it's very interesting, to see the difference, because there were a couple of months in that first half of 2020 where no business happened. And then the condo market. So in 2016, the median price was $1 million. And today the median price is $1.1 million. So it's a 10% increase. There's also a 10% increase from first half of 2020 to first half of 2021. There's another 10% increase there. But again, the volume, it's kind of great that we have a 10% increase year over year, because the volume, again, in 2020, there were 105 units sold in Santa Monica first half of the year. And in 2021, there were 226, so more than double the amount. And they still hung on to a 10% increase. So that's pretty good. Okay, stopping the share.
And then I think there may be a couple people in the waiting room. I got a text from Brandon, Lauren, if you want to let anyone else in.
I admitted them.
Okay. So now we will dive into our conversation.
Who's that? Who's that?
Okay.
So now we'll dive into our conversation regarding this crazy market that we're in. So the first thing that we want to talk about is has to do with buyers, and it's how to make your offer stand out. So we're in a very competitive market. So anything that we can do to stack the odds in your favor, we try to do as buyer's agents. So one way is to write what we call a love letter to the seller. And it's important to note that not every agent will accept the letter. So assuming that the listing is accepting, love letters, we definitely encourage you as a buyer to write one. If the agent is not accepting letters, then we obviously, you don't need to write a letter. But the love letter can, it kind of sets your offer apart, and it helps personalize your letter. And we suggest that you include a little bit of information about yourself. So a little bit of introduction on who you are, your family, maybe your background, what you do professionally, and then what you like about the home. If there are any features or amenities that you love about the home, especially if it's something that the seller personally did. Sellers love when people, love what they've done to their homes. And so those are the types of things that you want to focus on. And it's worth mentioning that we've had clients who didn't necessarily have the highest offer price, but they submitted a love letter to the seller, and that letter resonated with the seller for whatever reason, to the point where the seller actually accepted their offer over other buyers' offers who were, stronger in terms of price and sometimes terms. So a love letter to the seller can definitely go a very, very long way.
Right. Okay. So that another way that to make your offer stand out is with the terms that you offer. So typically in this market, practically every listing is getting multiple offers, and we never know when we're representing a buyer. We're never going to be able to tell you what what Joe and Sally are offering, over there. We have no idea. We're not privy to that information, and we'll never have that information. So what we really try to do is get as much information as we can from the listing agent. This is a really important piece of the negotiation. It's like that if you're a buyer, your representative should really be engaged in a dialogue with the listing agent to understand what is important to the sellers, because obviously anything that you can do to satisfy the seller's needs about what's important to them, that's great. That's going to give you a better chance. So terms can be like closing period. One of the terms that is very, very commonly, done in this market is the removal of the appraisal contingency up front. Okay. So whenever a property gets into escrow, there is built into the contract, there is a contingency for the bank to appraise the property. That means the bank sends an appraiser to verify the value of the home. You know what I mean? The bank doesn't want to lend money on a home, that isn't worth it, basically. And given how competitive the market is, and given that in this market, because of the demand, prices are rising faster than the comps can keep up with it. So like by the time there's a closing, 30 to 45 days later, there's already been a couple other properties that have come up with multiple offers, and the prices have already gone past the comps. So in this market, if you are able to remove the appraisal contingency, it's a great tool to make your offer more like a cash offer. There are ramifications though. If you are removing the appraisal contingency, basically what you're saying to the seller is, if there is a discrepancy and if the appraisal doesn't come in at value, that you would make up the difference if there was a difference to make up in the price. So you have to be prepared. If you're putting 30, 40, 50% down, it's not going to be an issue because it's not going to really affect the terms of your loan if it doesn't appraise. But if you're putting 20% down or less, if the appraisal doesn't come in, it can affect the terms of your loan. So you'd have to have extra cash on hand to make up the difference. But it's a very, very, very compelling term for the seller because it does make your offer akin to a cash offer.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So another way that we make our buyer's offer stand out is by having the lender contact the listing agent directly and basically just give like a glowing review of our buyer's financials, answer any concerns that the listing agent may have regarding the finance terms in the offer. And this step also really puts the listing agent's mind at ease. So in turn, when they're presenting, our client's offer to the seller, they have a little bit more confidence in terms of presenting that offer. So we definitely highly recommend that you have your lender contact the listing agent.
And then the final one is, I really already touched on this, but understanding the seller. Like, again, it goes back to communication and having your agent like really understand where the seller is at. Do they need a lease back, for instance? Sometimes sellers are trying to buy an upleg property and they don't know exactly where they're going. So they need like a period of time to stay in the house after closing potentially. Or do they need, it could be anything, everybody's in a different situation. So the more you can understand about the seller's situation and help them basically with their situation, the better chance you have of getting your offer accepted, even if it's not the very highest offer. But if you can, sort of satisfy a need of the sellers, then they're more likely to accept you. So that's that.
So our next topic, and again, we're going to leave time at the end for any questions that you guys may have. But the next thing we wanted to kind of answer or focus on is how to manage your emotions as a buyer. It's a very emotional process. We're both buyers and sellers, and we'll talk about the seller emotional process a little bit later. But how to manage your emotions as a buyer. So Lauren, I know you wanted to.
Okay, so it's really hard. It's a hard market to buy in. Do you know what I mean? And I don't want to sound negative, and I'm not trying to like turn people off to buying, but this is just the reality that we're facing. Interest rates are also at all-time lows still. Their rates are in like the low, you can even get rates under 3% or in the very low threes. So, with rents as high as they are, it makes a lot of sense. It still makes sense for people to buy. You know what I mean? It still makes sense to get into something. Oftentimes a mortgage is still less than you would be paying in rent. Mm-hmm. So there's really no, but you just have to be mentally prepared that you have to persevere. Do you know what I mean? There will be competition. And I think the thing that drives buyers the most crazy is that like, they don't know, you're making an offer on a property and you don't want to lose it over, let's say, $5,000. Do you know what I mean? Like, but you don't know what this guy or that guy, you don't know what the other people are going to do. And I think that that's what drives buyers the most crazy. Like, well, if only I knew, I'd be able to, offer $5,000 more or whatever it is. And so this is where almost like the spiritual part has to come in. It's not about anybody else. It's only about you. And this is what we tell our buyers: forget everybody else. Ultimately, what is going to serve you, right? What is the highest number that you're willing to go, that you're at peace if you get it? This is what I tell people all the time. You have to be at peace if you get it. You have to be at peace if you don't get it, and it really is an inner journey. And it is a dive into like what your priorities and what you are really willing to do and what you are really going to be at peace with, because you're never going to know what other people are doing. And so I would say that's, being prepared for that and knowing that up front is crucial.
Okay. So along those lines, what I'm about to say may sound a little harsh, but I feel like it's our duty and our job to kind of adequately prepare you for what to expect in this market as a buyer. So, the market's crazy. It's insane. The competition is very stiff. And sadly, because this is the type of market we're in, most buyers, and I would even dare to say all buyers, are practically overpaying for properties. They're overpaying. They realize that they have to overpay in order to get their offer accepted. So if we have a buyer client and their budget is $1 million, we can no longer send them properties priced at $1 million, because we know that $1 million listing is going to ultimately sell for 1.2. So instead of sending listings that are priced at $1 million, we're now sending listings priced at $800,000 to give them that wiggle room and that room to negotiate so that they can increase their price up to a point where it's going to be competitive. So so that's what I would say. Just kind of to manage your expectations, you have to be willing to overpay in this market. I don't think it's going to be this way forever, but the market that we're in right now, that's what we're seeing.
And no one knows when it's going to change either.
Yeah.
People ask us that all the time. Well, what do you think is going to happen? So far, interest rates can only go in one direction, and that is up. But right now, with the economy the way it is, it doesn't seem like they're going to raise interest rates anytime soon. And that's really what's driving the market. So the third thing I want to say is about walkaway power. Like you need to have, as a buyer, it's very powerful if you have walkaway power. And this also goes into, for your own peace of mind. Like, again, knowing what you're really willing to do, knowing what you're able to do, you're willing to push yourself to X amount or whatever it is. And then, really having the ability to walk away and knowing that you're going to be okay, knowing that you're going to get something. Do you know what I mean? Because you don't want to feel taken advantage of. Do you know what I mean? You don't want to feel like you're being played. And there are sellers who can really definitely get carried away in this market. And that doesn't really work for them either. ultimately. So knowing what your limits are and being willing to walk away is also, I would say, it's crucial for managing your emotions and for just feeling at peace.
And then the next thing I would say as a buyer is you have to be willing to compromise. So again, because we're in a competitive market, you may have a wish list of 10 things that are must-haves for you, but at some point you're going to have to give on some of those. So, maybe you sacrifice square footage to get into the neighborhood with a certain school that you want to be in. Or maybe you sacrifice square footage over location or whatever the case may be. Just, you have to go in it knowing that you have to be flexible in the things that you're looking for in your home in this market.
Yes. And then the final thing that we would say is to just, when you're going through this and buying something, to be open with your agent, you know what I mean? And it's heavy duty to go through this. It's a lot. And we are here, I'm saying we as agents, our role is to be here for you and to talk to you about it and to help you through it, And so it's really important to express your feelings and talk about, it's totally normal. One minute you think you're going to spend 1.5 and you're totally gung-ho and you're ready to spend 1.5, and then the next minute you're in a panic. You know what I mean? And it's like, oh my God, I can't go over 1.2 or whatever it is. So it's important to be open, and, we're here to guide you. We're here to bring you down to earth. And ultimately the decisions are yours. We do not make decisions for our clients, but we are a sounding board. And hopefully we can, help with the sanity, really.
And I would say, know that everything that you're feeling is valid. They say there's like the 4 most stressful events in anyone's life. 1 is like, loss of a loved one. 2 is getting married. 3 is divorce. And then 4 is like buying or selling a home. So this is normal. It's a very emotional process. So all of your emotions are valid. And, we are here to, like Lauren said, be that sounding board and advise and let you vent. And we do try to absorb as much of the stress as we possibly can for you. So,
yes.
Okay. So the next thing we're going to talk about, what should buyers expect in this market?
Okay, well, I kind of touched on this already, but 2 things to expect. The appraisal, like I talked about in the terms section, taking out the appraisal contingency. As a serious buyer, you should expect to have to do that when you're making an offer. It's a very powerful tool, and it gives the seller the confidence that even if the property doesn't appraise, that this buyer is going to buy it. So that, I would say, if you're a serious buyer, you should expect to do that. And then we get into repairs. Whenever you get into escrow, you have a contingency period for your investigations, and you're going to inspect the property. Typically, what we advise buyers is that when you come back to the seller for repairs, it needs to be health and safety issues. It's not wear and tear items. It's not, oh, the drain stopper doesn't work and the door doesn't close all the way. This is not the kind of thing that you would ask for in a request for repairs. But things like active leaks or problems with the foundation or electrical problems that can be hazardous, those are the types of things that you would ask either for a correction or a credit. However, in this market, with so many buyers, and very oftentimes when you are the lucky one to get an offer, there's 1 or 2 or even 3 backup offers behind you just waiting to get the property. So very often sellers are going to try to get away with as little as they can, basically, with paying as little as they can for repairs. So, everything is on an individual basis. You can't make any rules. I mean, obviously some repairs are much more consuming than others. So it just depends, but you should expect resistance from the seller in terms of repairs, and be prepared to take certain things on. And again, if you're not prepared to take certain things on, that's okay. But just, you might have to walk away.
Mm-hmm. And then the next thing I would say would be, be prepared for shortened contingencies and really quick, turnaround response timelines. So I'm definitely, more and more surprised at the counters that, we're receiving for our buyers. In this market, you can expect a seller to counter back with very aggressive terms and very aggressive contingency timelines. And as Lauren mentioned, in most cases, they're waiving the appraisal contingency. So they're shortening the loan contingency. They're shortening the inspection contingency. And then normally the contract defaults to 3 days in terms of you being allowed to respond to the seller's counter. And we're seeing short turnaround times as short as like 24 hours, if that. So as a buyer, you need to be prepared to make really fast decisions in this market because it's such a fast moving market. And then you also need to be prepared to make fast decisions when it comes to what properties you want to see. So, if your agent sends you, 10 listings, you can't take 3 days to go through the list, unfortunately, and get back to them and let them know which ones you want to see. Because more and more, we're seeing properties are only being shown on like 2 days. So you have 2 days to see a property. There's short, increments of when you can see it. And unfortunately, if you don't submit your request to see that property quickly, you may lose out and not be able to view it at all. So you definitely have to be prepared to move fast and to mentally respond quick. Okay, so I think, so we're done with our buyer section. So now we're gonna shift the focus to sellers. And I know the first thing that we want to talk about for sellers is what should sellers expect in this market?
Just real quick, does anyone have any questions like about being a buyer in this market before we shift our focus to sellers?
Unmuted.
Okay.
I saw in the newspaper the other day about an offer that was they gave a price and then they said they would add $10,000 over the highest offer, if it was a multiple offer situation, up to a certain amount of money. Is that like a viable strategy? It sounds kind of cutthroat to me.
It's a viable strategy.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And it's one, honestly, that we've used quite a bit recently. So that's called an escalation clause.
Okay.
And you have that language in an offer. So basically, for instance, you would say, purchase price to be $1 million or $5,000 above the highest bona fide offer received, not to exceed 1.2.
Right. Okay. That's not great. I suppose that gives you peace of mind too, because then you don't go into some endless like counter thing, like Lauren was saying, right? You can kind of get it, figure out your limit ahead of time or something.
Right. And then you're not competing against yourself as well,
right, yeah.
So.
Cool.
The only thing I'll say, and I don't happen to disagree with this, but there are certain listing agents who will not accept, what do you want to say, escalation clauses.
Okay.
So you have to find that out before you submit one. I personally have a problem with that because ultimately it's the seller that's making the decision. It's not the agent.
Right.
I mean, it's not about us. It's about the clients. So
right.
I do think that that's like an agent making it about them in a way, or like overstepping that line. You know what I mean? However, if that's what we're dealing with, that's what we're dealing with. You know what I mean? And the seller still chose that person. So we have to work with what we are given. So it's important, again, for the buyer's representative to have a conversation with the listing agent and really get from, talk to them about it, say,
with their blessing.
Where my client would like to submit an escalation clause, you know what I mean? And how do you think the seller would react, or what do you think of that?
Right. Okay. Well, that's great. I mean, I'm glad. So you guys are doing it. Okay. So that's like.
Oh yeah. We do it because it's a way for a buyer, the thing for buyers that is the worst is that, like, even if they get the place, which is amazing, it's like you never, then the next thought is like, you're extremely happy. Oh my God, I got my dream house. I'm so excited. The next thought is, oh my God, what if I overpaid by $50,000 or whatever?
Right. Yeah.
You know what I mean? And it's like, so this prevents buyers from feeling like they've overpaid by some crazy amount.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's super helpful. Thank you.
Any other buyer-related questions before we move on? No? Okay. All right. Do you want to start, Lauren?
Okay, so
With what
what
you said.
now as a seller? So yes, I mean, this market, obviously it's a seller's market, right? You know, so yes, it's great for sellers. But there are things that you should know as a seller too, because, you know, when something is too good to be true in general, it is. And so there are things, expectations to set for sellers. So the first thing, what should sellers expect in this market? Well, a seller should expect to prepare. If you as a seller really want to have this kind of reaction to your home, like what we're talking about, people going crazy for it and people fighting for it, you really have to prepare the home. You have to make it look as good as you possibly can. And we always say, like, we want your house to look good on Instagram. Like, there is a formula. Do you know what I mean? It does work. You know what I mean? And when a house is presented in a certain way, buyers tend to flock. And so that means painting, that means staging. The people that get the most money for their homes, they put money into it. You know, you have to spend money to make money, and they spend money on it, and they make the house, they do the landscaping, they do, you know, like I said, this typically it's like staging, painting, maybe redoing the floors. That's another one that's very common. You know, if you really, really want to get the high price, you have to meet the market in terms of what the expectations are of the buyers. And we are living in a culture of, you know, like, you know, every TV show is like about remodeling your house or like selling a house. It's like, what is it? Not IGTV, but it's
HGTV.
HGTV, right? So we're living in it's the HGTV world. Do you know what I mean? And so buyers do have expectations of things being a certain way, you know? And as a seller, if you meet those expectations, that's when you really get the benefit.
Yeah.
So that's what I would say. And then, do you want me to talk about pricing? Pricing.
Yeah.
Pricing is still like, we are in a market that is going beyond the comps. You know what I mean? So what are our tools? We can look at the comps and say, okay, houses in your neighborhood that are similar in size, you know, there's no two houses exactly the same, but here's the price range. You know what I mean? That houses of this kind of size and this kind of style are selling in your neighborhood. That's what we have to go on. But we are in a neighborhood that's going over the comp, in a market that's going over the comps. But as a seller, it's really, really, really crucial to price your home effectively. And what I mean by that is that you want buyers to walk into your house and say, oh, this is really nice. This is worth the money. You want a buyer to feel like this is worth it. You know what I mean? I'm not getting ripped off here. And if a buyer feels that, then it's so interesting, because once they feel that way, like what you're offering, there's value there, then it's like there's no telling how high they'll go. Then they feel like they have to get it. But if you start out too high, you know, and pricing it really aggressively, and buyers don't have that feeling when they walk in like, wow, this is worth the money, then you will not get the reaction. So it's still very important to price your home according to the comps, and even maybe slightly under the comps, even though the market is going over the comps.
And then the only thing I would add is, you know, in this market, as we mentioned, buyers are overpaying quite substantially. So with that overpaying comes a certain level of expectation when it comes to property condition. So, you know, as a seller, you should expect the buyer to perform every inspection imaginable when they're, you know, truly overpaying for something, because they want to make sure that what they're buying is solid. So most buyers will ask for repairs for health and safety related items. And the repair process, it's always a negotiation. But as a seller, you should be mindful that if escrow cancels, you are legally obligated to provide the inspection reports, so all the inspection reports from that escrow, and disclose any sort of material finding that's uncovered to that next buyer. So it's in your best interest to try to make it work with the existing buyer if you can, but you should go into escrow knowing that there will be a request for repair. Even if you counter property to be sold as is, seller will not perform any repairs or issue any credits. We see that language all the time. We include that language sometimes in our counters, but it's just human nature. Buyers will still ask for something. So it's good to kind of expect that.
Yes, definitely. And how to manage your emotions as a seller. So let's talk about that, because it's also
Yes.
very emotional. And I mean, the hard thing for sellers too is like, you know, very often sellers will have this, you know, idealized vision of what their house is. They've been living there maybe 20 or 30 years. They truly don't notice that, you know, the floor is, you know, sloped like Mammoth Mountain or whatever. But, you know, but we all do this in our own homes. Like there are certain things that we don't even notice at all. We're just used to living with it.
Right.
And so it's hard for a seller to see the home through the eyes of a brand new buyer.
Yeah.
That's the challenge.
Yeah. So in this market where everything is moving at like a lightning speed, you know, as we mentioned, buyers are full of emotions and many will overpay just to get an accepted offer. And then once they're in escrow, they start second guessing themselves like, oh no, what have I done? The emotions start to kind of catch up with them. So as a seller, you should always be prepared for a potential buyer cancellation. And the way to do that is to make sure you have a backup offer in place. So you would essentially execute what's called a backup offer addendum with the buyer, the next buyer that has like the next best offer. So in the event that you have to cancel escrow, you can hopefully reopen escrow with this new buyer, assuming they haven't moved on to another property and they're not currently in escrow, and assuming that they're still interested. So you always want to make sure as a seller you have a backup contingency plan in place, because you never know what's going to happen once you open escrow.
Yeah. And there can be really legitimate things too. I mean, things happen, you know, people's lives change, someone dies, someone loses a job. I mean, sometimes it's rare, but things like that can happen too, you know? So it is important. And then having backup offers goes back to pricing. So you're only going to have a backup offer if you get multiple offers, right? You're not going to have a backup offer if there's only one offer making an offer.
Right.
So it goes back to that pricing piece and really pricing it to create a bidding war. And then you can have people basically lined up.
Right.
But the other emotion that's really, really hard for sellers, the thing that's really stressful for sellers is the investigation period. So buyers are going to inspect the property and they're probably going to do all kinds of inspections that you never did when you bought the house, you know, because 20 years ago or 30 years ago, people didn't do sewer line inspections or mold inspections or, you know, whatever it is. And you know, we are even surprised sometimes with the inspections that people do, you know, but again, people are paying, you know, you have to have compassion and understand people are paying such high prices, higher prices than ever, you know, such high prices for homes. And they just want to make sure, you know, that there's nothing wrong with them. So as a seller, you just have to get into the zen of the situation and, you know, again, trust the process and realize that if there is something wrong, you know, everything can be fixed, everything can be dealt with. You know, it's very, very rare that something is just a total catastrophe and that there's no, you know, solution.
Right.
And so you just have to, you know, try to understand that buyers are nervous, they're paying more than ever, they're going to do heavy duty investigations and, you know, and talk to your agent and trust your agent and we'll, you know, we will work it out and we do work it out.
Yeah. I think the next thing that sellers tend to feel a lot is fear, and the fear over choosing the wrong offer, especially when you have 20 offers in front of you. It's like, you know, how do you decide and discern which offer you should move forward with? You know, picking the right offer, it can be daunting. So our recommendation is just a fact check. You want to, you know, check the facts. So what I mean by that is, in addition to the offer, we always request that the buyer's agent send the buyer's pre-approval letter and their proof of funds. And then when we receive that pre-approval letter, in many cases, we're contacting the lender, just kind of verifying everything that's in that pre-approval letter. And then we're also looking at their proof of funds. So proof of funds in this market is really important because we're waiving the appraisal contingency. So normally when we're kind of, you know, scanning the proof of funds, we want to make sure they have enough for whatever down payment they've written into the offer. and then for closing costs. But now it's like we almost have to kind of estimate, based on the contract price, what we think the appraisal may come in at. And if we think it's going to be like a $200,000 gap, we need to see that that buyer has in excess of $200,000 plus, down payment and closing costs, in terms of proof of funds. So the best way to kind of get over that fear is to fact check. And secondly, going back to what we said, having a backup offer in place. So, if you happen to choose the wrong offer, hopefully the backup offer is the right one.
Right. And then love letters. So I'm going to go back to love letters. So what we said, everything that we said as a buyer's representative, in terms of love letters from the seller. So now we're going to take it all back. So when we are listing properties, we tell people do not submit love letters. And let me tell you why. It's not that the buyers, first of all, there's the internet, right? And so unless John Smith is making the offer, all sellers are looking everybody up on the internet. Okay? We all know that. But our job is to protect our sellers. And there's fair housing laws. And the reason that we don't allow love letters on our listings is because we don't want our seller to be accused of unconscious bias and of choosing one person over another person because that person was X. They like people of color, or they don't like people with tattoos. They like gay people. They don't like gay people, whatever. Everybody does have a lens that they see the world through. And we are living in a very litigious world. And we don't, someone who is scorned or spurned, do you know what I mean? We don't know how they see the world, and we don't want to open up anyone to a lawsuit. You know what I mean? And so it's really important. So we basically put the kibosh on that on our listings and don't even accept them. And we tell people up front they will not be submitted to the seller. After the seller, and we really try to base decisions on the facts, on the bank statement, on the lender. Sometimes we might ask a potential buyer to, if we don't know the lender or we don't trust the lender that they have submitted with, we might ask them to get approved with one of the lenders that we do know and trust. You know what I mean? As a way of finding out, okay, is this person really got what it takes to close? So we really try to base the decisions on, like Erica said, the facts and the data. Yeah. And not the feeling like, oh, they have a cute dog, So that's what we have for you today. Any questions in terms of selling a house in this market?
No? Any other questions in general?
Alan?
Oh, that was actually kind of scary, eye opener. We're potentially in both a seller and buyer situation. That's kind of where we may be. And so, from a seller standpoint, that's interesting. All the verification of funds in a rapidly moving market. They might have like a $200,000 gap, just like bing, they multiple offers and everything. So I was just saying to Jennifer that
it's helpful information to cover our asses.
Right, it's super helpful.
Exactly. Yeah.
Thank you for that.
Are you potentially buying in Oregon?
It's funny. Our son, he was living out of town for a while, and he's moved back near us, and so we're thinking of maybe getting a dual living kind of situation together, which would be nice, So we're exploring that, and we love our 120-year-old house here. It's beautiful, but it's a lot of work, and so we're thinking of selling that, and it'll be interesting, and we're thinking of. And all at the same time living full-time or almost full-time in Santa Barbara, so we may remodel that. So it's all the life stressors, like right.
Lucky you.
Yeah, right.
Well, I told Alan sarcastically that okay, one life stressor is we're trying to sell a house. The other is we're trying to buy a house. We're thinking of remodeling. And as long as it doesn't end up in divorce or death of a loved one, we'll be okay. Yeah, we've got a lot of kind of ideas floating right now, and this is very helpful for all of our different plans that are up in the air right now.
That's awesome. I'm so glad to hear that. And if you need referrals, I'm sure that the market is very hot in Oregon. I mean, LA is its own particular animal. Markets are hot all over the place. I don't know how different Oregon would really be, but if you need referrals ever, we can provide referrals all over the country.
Oh, gee, thanks a lot. Appreciate that.
Yeah. You're welcome.
Good to see both of you.
Yeah, really good.
Very nice to see you.
Good to see you guys too.
All right.
And Roxanne, you too.
Good to see you.
So we'll keep you informed.
I don't plan on selling. I would like to buy a house, but I don't know. I feel like the market is too volatile and too rocky right now. So I just try and soak up all the knowledge for when it hopefully calms down.
You know what? It's interesting though, because this is what we're starting to, a lot of buyers are like, very cautious. They're a little bit intimidated, I think, right now about the market. And it's going to be interesting if we start seeing that kind of across the board, that will shift the market a little bit.
And I read this morning in the LA Times, it said mortgage applications are down 24% year over year. And they've been flat for like the last 3 weeks. So it seems that a lot of buyers are definitely maybe just putting a pause on searching or kind of exiting the market, I think, temporarily. So we're starting to see a slight shift. I read that this morning and I took a note on it because I thought that was really interesting.
Yeah. I mean, that was kind of my question, which was unrelated to today's topic, which was just around like mortgage forbearance and people who will eventually choose to sell or be forced to sell because they can't keep up with their mortgages and their homes anymore post-pandemic. Do you feel like that is going to then put more houses on the market in the next year or so when those terms start to close up, when Biden, ends the forbearance on mortgages and foreclosures and stuff like that? Which is an awful thing to think. I don't want anyone to push that out of their house.
You know what? The thing is that for so many years now, the rates have been amazing and so most, when we saw the crash last time in 2008, people were in these horrible mortgages, but no one's in a horrible mortgage right now.
Right.
You know what I mean? And even if they can't afford to pay their mortgage, they can sell at a profit.
Still.
So I don't see a lot of foreclosures around the pike just because the loans have been so favorable for so long, and the amount of, I don't know how many, the amount everyone in the world has refinanced.
But I do potentially see an influx of listings as a result. But not foreclosures.
But, and even if there is an influx of listings, if there are people who they can't, afford the home and they can sell at a profit, so be it. So they sell it at a profit and more comes on the market and that shifts the balance a little bit. It's also, the other part is like, there's so little inventory. So, that would still be a positive, even if they're not foreclosures.
Right.
Yeah. Less foreclosures. I don't want anyone to go through that process, but I was curious if at some point more listings would show up as a result of people just in over their heads with mortgage payments or just ready to, move on as a post.
There's another issue though, Roxanne, and it's sadly, it's not what you want to hear, but because the interest rates are so good and that most people have refinanced into really great interest rates, they can rent out the house. Even if you can't afford your own mortgage payment, you're going through a hard time, a lot of people still can rent out the house at a profit. So
any more questions before we depart? No? Well, it was so good seeing all of you.
Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you.
And please stay in touch. And if there's a topic you'd want us, now that we're sort of more out in the world now, we're going to do this quarterly instead of monthly. And if there's any topics that you feel would be of value, we would be happy to cover them. So just
Mhm.
send us an email and let us know.
Great.
All right, we'll see you guys next quarter.
Thank you.
Okay, bye. Have a good night, everybody. Bye.
Bye.